Imagine returning home from work to see that your husband has set your brand new car on fire out of jealousy. This is a story of a couple who found themselves in a very toxic marriage. It all began on one morning when Biodun's mother brought him a girl from the village to marry. Mother, how do you expect me to marry a local girl you picked up from the village? Did you see the way she was chewing her food like a goat? Mama, I'm too refined to be seen around such a woman. Talk more of marrying her as my wife. Biodun said to his mother, who gave him a long and cold stare. That young woman you are insulting is a very humble and intelligent girl. She was not as opportune as you were, so quit insulting her and start seeing her as your wife, because soon you both will be married. And Yola would make the best wife for you, Biodun's mother said to him as she convinced him to marry the girl that she had picked. Biodun, being a workaholic, spared no time for relationships. His mother, for all these years, waited patiently for him to introduce a woman to her, but Biodun was too occupied with work to even think about marriage. His mother, desperate to see her son settle down, took matters into her own hands. She traveled to their village and chose Eniola, a simple and well-mannered young woman from a humble background. To Mama, Eniola represented everything a good wife should be: obedient, respectful, and willing to build a family. But for Biodun, she was far from what he imagined his wife should be. Days turned into weeks, and despite his mother's persistence, Biodun couldn't bring himself to warm up to Eniola. She was quiet and polite, but to him, that translated to weakness. How could I, a successful educated man, end up with a village girl? He often thought to himself. His friends mocked him when they heard about the arranged engagement, further fueling his disdain for Eniola. He began avoiding her at every opportunity, ignoring his mother's arrangement for them to spend time together. But Eniola, though hurt by his coldness, remained patient. She was raised to respect her elders, and Mama had spoken highly of her son before introducing them. She believed that with time, Biodun would come to see her true worth. She tried her best to adapt to city life, learning what she could about the modern world, though it was a far cry from the village where she had grown up. She knew Biodun was a hard-working man, and that only added to her admiration for him, even if he couldn't see her in the same light. One evening, after a particularly tense conversation about their impending wedding, Biodun lashed out at his mother in frustration. I can't marry a girl like her, Mama. She's not on my level. What will people think when they see me with her? His mother, tired of his arrogance, finally lost her patience. Biodun, you've always judged people by their status and appearance, but I see qualities in Eniola that you refuse to notice. She's kind, humble, and has the potential to grow into a strong woman. You, my son, need a woman like her to balance the pride you have inside of you. Biodun, in a bid to make his mother happy, got married to Eniola. He knew that he would not hear the last of it if he refused to marry her, so he succumbed to his mother's wishes, even when he knew that he had no atom of love for her. In his eyes, Eniola was a village girl who came from a very poor family. Biodun got married to her to get his mother off his back by giving her the grandchildren that she so desperately needed. Eniola could feel his coldness towards her. His mother had told her that her son was a workaholic and that Eniola should not worry herself, as Biodun would grow to love her as the months went by. Eniola, having this in mind, did all she could to win her husband's heart, but Biodun did not seem to care about her. They lived like strangers in the same home, sharing one bed, which was only used to make babies. Biodun viewed their marriage as an obligation, something to appease his mother and fulfill the traditional expectation of having a family. Eniola, on the other hand, held out hope. She believed that with time, Biodun would see her worth, Just as his mother had said, their marriage was not built on love, but Eniola's patience knew no bounds. She cooked his favorite meals, took care of the house, and did everything she could to win Biodun's heart. But Biodun remained distant, cold even. He often stayed late at work, coming home only to sleep, and their bed was used only for one purpose: to make babies. The intimacy that Eniola craved was non-existent, and the emotional void between them grew wider with each passing day. As the months turned into years, Biodun's resentment towards Eniola deepened. Though she bore him two beautiful children, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had been forced into a marriage he didn't want. He looked at Eniola and saw only the village girl his mother had chosen for him. He rarely acknowledged her efforts to please him and instead criticized her at every given opportunity. "You will never understand my world," he would say. "You don't belong here." Eniola felt the sting of his words but chose to remain silent. She knew that speaking up would only make things worse. Despite the loveless nature of their marriage, Eniola found solace in her children. She poured her love and energy into raising them, hoping that one day Biodun would realize how much she had sacrificed for their family. But in Biodun's eyes, she was nothing more than a woman from the village, and he treated her as such. One day, after years of being a housewife, Eniola approached Biodun with a shocking request. "I want to work," she said softly, hoping that he would be supportive of her request. But instead of encouraging her, Biodun laughed hysterically at her. "Work? What can you do? You're just a village girl with your village education," he said to her mockingly, his words cutting deep. But Eniola refused to be discouraged. She was educated. Though she attended the village schools, Eniola believed that she had so much to give and was willing to give it a shot. So, she began searching for a job in the city. She went from one establishment to another and faced several rejections, but this did not deter her, as she was determined to find a job. After weeks of relentless search, Eniola finally got a job at a local firm. The pay wasn't much, but it was a good start for her. Biodun could not hold back his laughter when he heard how much the company was willing to pay her. He was earning over 20 times more and could not help but ridicule Eniola for her little achievement. He constantly reminded her of how insignificant her job was compared to his, belittling her efforts whenever the topic came up. "You should just stick to taking care of the house and the kids. That's the only thing you're good at," he would say with disdain. But despite his harsh words, Eniola pressed on. She threw herself into her work, determined to make something of herself, despite her husband's lack of support. Eniola struggled with her work. It was not so easy at the start, but as time went on, she got the hang of the job and began to excel. Gradually, she gained the respect of her colleagues and even won the heart of her boss, who within 5 months promoted her to a managerial position in the company. The salary increase was significant, and for the first time, she could contribute financially to the household in a meaningful way. But rather than being proud of her success, Biodun became increasingly bitter. He couldn't stand the fact that his wife, the woman he had always belittled, was beginning to rise. His envy festered, turning into resentment that made him question how Eniola could be so successful in such a short period of time. Her salary was now more than his, and Biodun could not live with the idea that his village wife had now become more successful than he was. So, he began to accuse Eniola of having an affair with her boss, because that was the only explanation that his head could comprehend. Eniola did everything to convince her husband that her promotion was merited, but Biodun already had his mind made up. What he did not know was that everything that happened for Eniola happened because of her constant dedication to learn. What had happened was that on one morning, her boss walked into the office extremely angry and frustrated. Some records, which he gave to one of her colleagues to work on, had so many errors, and her boss was extremely furious because he knew how long it took to balance such records. The entire office was in a state of panic as no one wanted to face the wrath of their boss. Eniola, noticing the tension in the office, quietly walked over to her colleague's desk and offered to help. At first, her colleague was reluctant, but with no other solution in sight, she handed over the files to Eniola. Eniola immediately took the files to her table, switched on her computer and began to work. Everyone looked at her in shock as they wondered what she was doing with the files on her computer. In less than 2 hours, Eniola walked up to her boss with the files. She had made all the corrections in less than 2 hours, and her boss could not believe his eyes. It usually took them 12 hours to balance the records manually, and within 2 hours, Eniola had balanced the same records. Her boss stared at the corrected files in disbelief. "How did you do this?" he asked, his voice filled with astonishment. The entire office fell silent as they waited for Eniola's response. Eniola, though shy, explained that a certain man who visited their village from overseas taught her some computer skills that he believed would be beneficial to her in the future. He saw how good she was with numbers and told her that the skills would help her simplify tasks that others could only do manually. And Eniola, always desperate for knowledge, learned the computer skills as though her life depended on it. It was with this skill that Eniola completed the task swiftly, and her boss was not only impressed with her, but also grateful to have her as part of their team. Without wasting any time, Eniola was put in charge of balancing the firm's records and began to work closely with her boss, who looked extremely handsome. Her husband's jealousy grew darker as each day passed. He became convinced that Eniola must be having an affair with her boss, believing that there was no other explanation for her sudden success. "There's no way you're getting all these promotions based on merit," he snarled one evening. "You must be sleeping with him," he accused her. His baseless accusation shocked Eniola, who had done nothing but work hard to build her career. Hurt by his words, she tried to explain, but Biodun refused to listen to her. In his eyes, Eniola was just a village girl, too simple to achieve anything on her own. He became obsessed with the idea of her infidelity and began showing up at her workplace unannounced, watching her every move and even following her after work. His behavior grew more erratic with each passing day, and their marriage, which had already been strained, was now teetering on the edge of a collapse. One day, Biodun abandoned the work he had to do in his office to go monitor his wife, who he believed was cheating on him with her boss. He spent hours parked across the street from her office, monitoring her every move, his mind wandering further from his job and focused entirely on catching his wife red-handed with her boss. Just as he was stationed in his car, spying on Eniola's office, his boss called up his phone. Biodun was about to pick up the call when he saw Eniola laughing and walking out of the office with her boss, who opened his car door for her. Biodun could not contain his anger. He ignored his boss's calls. His heart raced at the thought of another man having an affair with his wife. Biodun could not understand why he felt that way, but he felt a surge of jealousy and rage as he watched them drive off together. Without hesitation, he started his car and followed them, convinced that he was about to witness his worst nightmare unfold. His mind raced with thoughts of betrayal, and every laugh Eniola shared with her boss felt like a dagger in his chest. They eventually pulled into a car dealership where Biodun parked at a distance, watching intently. Eniola and her boss got out of the car and walked towards the showroom, pointing at different cars as they spoke with a salesman. Biodun's anger intensified as he watched them negotiate and price a sleek new car. In his mind, there was only one explanation. Her boss was buying Eniola a car to impress her, a clear sign of an affair. Unable to bear the sight any longer, Biodun sped off, leaving them at the dealership. His thoughts were clouded with fury and his jealousy consumed him. "She's making a fool of me," he muttered under his breath. "They both are." Convinced of his wife's infidelity, Biodun drove back to his office, his heart pounding with resentment. When he arrived at work, he was greeted by his boss's furious face. "Where have you been, Biodun?" his boss demanded. "You missed a crucial meeting with our investors this afternoon. Investors that you were supposed to handle. We've lost them because of your negligence." Biodun stammered as he tried to come up with an excuse, but his boss wasn't interested in hearing anything that he had to say. "This isn't the first time you've been absent and distracted, and we can't afford to keep someone who doesn't prioritize the company. You're fired, effective immediately." The words hit Biodun like a blow to the stomach. Fired? He couldn't believe what he was hearing. His pride, his career, everything he had worked for was slipping through his fingers. In shock, he collected his belongings and left the office. When he arrived home later that evening, his fury had reached a boiling point. As he approached his house, something caught his eye. A brand new car was parked in front of the house. It was the same car he had seen Eniola and her boss pricing at the dealership. Filled with rage, Biodun set the car ablaze as he watched the flames gradually engulf the vehicle. Neighbors rushed out, alarmed by the fire, trying to stop the flames before they spread. Eniola, who had just arrived home, froze in disbelief when she saw the burning car. Her heart sank as she saw the vehicle in flames.
What are you doing, Biodun?
Eniola cried, her voice trembling with shock.
That's your birthday present. I bought it for you.
Biodun, still consumed by his fury and jealousy, looked at her in disbelief. "My birthday present?" he asked, shaking his head in disbelief. "You think I'm stupid? You and your boss bought that car together. I saw you both at the dealership, laughing and picking it out. I'm not a fool, Eniola. You've been cheating on me." Eniola's face turned pale as she realized the depth of her husband's jealousy. She could not believe that the man she had sacrificed so much for, the father of her children, could accuse her of such betrayal. "Biodun, I have never cheated on you. I bought the car as a gift to show my love and appreciation for you, despite the way you've treated me all these years. How could you think otherwise?" she asked as she handed over the car document, which had his name boldly written on it. Biodun's anger began to falter as the reality of what he had done set in. He had destroyed a gift meant for him, a token of love from a wife he had never truly appreciated. The flames of the car still burned brightly, but inside Biodun, something had extinguished. The truth hit him hard, and his chest tightened with regret. Eniola wiped her tears as she continued, her voice breaking as she spoke.
I worked so hard, hoping you'd finally see me, hoping we could finally be a real family, but all you've done is belittle me and accuse me of things I never did. I wanted to surprise you, to make you proud of me, but now you have shown me who you really are.
The neighbors, now gathered around the scene, began murmuring amongst themselves. Some shook their heads in disapproval, whilst others watched silently as the once proud man knelt beside the burning wreckage, broken by his own actions. Biodun slowly sank to his knees, realizing the full extent of his mistake. He had not only lost his job, but had also shattered his relationship with his wife, who had done nothing but support and love him, even in the face of his cruelty. The flames reflected in his tear-filled eyes, mirroring the destruction he had brought upon his own life. "I'm sorry, Eniola," he whispered, barely able to look her in the eyes. "I didn't know. I thought you were cheating on me with your boss." His voice shook with shame as he realized that he had ruined everything. Eniola stood silently for a moment, her heart heavy with pain. She had endured years of coldness and disrespect, and now, in front of her, was a man who was finally beginning to understand the depth of his failures. But was it too late? As the neighbors managed to put out the flames, Eniola turned to Biodun, her face still wet with tears.
I've tried for years, Biodun. I've been patient, waiting for you to see me as more than just a village girl. But I can't keep living like this, constantly trying to prove my worth to someone who refuses to acknowledge it.
With that, she walked past him, her steps steady, but her heart heavy. Biodun watched her go, his entire world crumbling around him. The smoke from the car lingered in the air, a painful reminder of the damage his pride and jealousy had caused. He had lost everything: his job, his self-respect, and most painfully, the love of a woman he had never truly appreciated until it was too late. As the night grew darker, Biodun sat alone, the ashes of the burned car around him, realizing that some things, once destroyed, could never be rebuilt. He got into the house and noticed that Eniola had locked herself up in her room. She was so bitter and didn't want to speak with him. Biodun could feel his heart rip out of his chest. He longed to make things right with her, but Eniola was in no mood to speak with him. He stood in front of her door for hours, pleading with her to forgive him, but Eniola remained silent as she pondered on what to do next. For weeks, Eniola gave Biodun the silent treatment, her coldness, a stark contrast to the warmth she once showered on him. Every attempt Biodun made to engage her was met with silence or indifference. The weight of her emotional distance felt heavier with each passing day, and Biodun, now deeply in love with the woman he had once dismissed, found himself in unbearable pain. The silence from Eniola was worse than losing his job. The lack of communication gnawed at him, leaving him restless and tormented. Biodun had never realized how much he needed her until now. His thoughts were consumed by her, and for the first time in his life, he felt powerless. He spent sleepless nights replaying every moment he had belittled her, every opportunity he missed to appreciate the incredible woman she was. He now saw the truth. Eniola wasn't just the village girl his pride once labeled her. She was his strength, his hope, and the one who truly balanced him. But now, it seemed she no longer wanted him. Desperate, he sought the help of his mother. He begged her to intervene, to talk to Eniola on his behalf, hoping that her words might soften Eniola's heart. His mother did as he asked, visiting Eniola and trying to make peace between them. "Eniola, my daughter," she said gently, "I know Biodun has hurt you deeply, and you have every right to be angry, but please, give him another chance. He knows he has wronged you." Eniola, though respectful, remained unmoved. The pain Biodun had caused over the years had left her heart bruised, and she was no longer willing to rush back into his arms. Biodun's apologies, though sincere, could not erase the hurt he had inflicted. She needed more than words to heal, and she wasn't ready to forgive him just yet. Biodun, crushed by her continued coldness, spiraled into a deep depression. He couldn't bear the thought of living without Eniola. The love he had come to feel for her was overwhelming, and the idea that she might never return that love broke him deeply. Every day, the walls of the house felt like they were closing in on him, suffocating him with guilt and regret. One evening, unable to cope any longer, Biodun decided that he couldn't continue living this way. The weight of his guilt, the job he had lost, and the love he feared he would never regain pushed him to a dark place. He wrote a note, apologizing to Eniola and their children, and then locked himself in the bathroom ready to end his life. Just as he was about to carry out his plan, Eniola burst into the room, her face pale with shock. She had sensed something was wrong and rushed to find him. Biodun, she screamed, her voice shaking with fear. What are you doing? Biodun, startled, looked at her with tear-filled eyes. I can't live like this anymore, Eniola, he whispered. I've lost everything. My job, my pride, and worst of all, you. I don't deserve you. I never did. I just wanted you to know how sorry I am before I go. Eniola's heart ached as she looked at the broken man before her. She had been angry, yes, but seeing Biodun like this, seeing how lost and defeated he had become, something inside her softened. The man who had once been so proud, so full of arrogance, was now vulnerable, pleading for her forgiveness in the most tragic way. No, Biodun, Eniola cried as she rushed towards him, pulling him into her arms. Don't you dare do this. Don't you dare leave me like this. Her voice cracked as she held him tightly. I've been hurt, yes. You've made mistakes, but ending your life is not the answer. We can walk through this. We can find a way. Biodun sobbed in her arms, his body shaking with emotion. I'm so sorry, Eniola. I was blinded by my pride, by my jealousy. I didn't see you for who you truly are, and now I've lost you. Eniola pulled back slightly, looking him in the eyes. You haven't lost me, Biodun, but things need to change. I need time to heal. We need time to rebuild what's been broken. I won't lie, it won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight, but I don't want to lose you either. They sat there for a long time, holding each other, their tears mixing with the raw emotions that filled the room. For the first time in a long time, there was no anger between them, only the possibility of healing. In the days that followed, Biodun worked harder than ever to prove to Eniola that he was a changed man. He showered her with so much love and attention, and as the days went by, the love he had for her increased. Biodun woke up one morning to see a message from his former boss. The investor, who had initially pulled out of the project he was handling, contacted his boss, requesting to give him another chance. Biodun was both surprised and confused by the message. He had thought that door was closed forever, especially after the investor pulled out because of his negligence. He quickly got dressed and rushed to his former office to meet with his boss, hoping to salvage what remained of his career. When he arrived, his boss explained. It seemed one of the investors had a change of heart. He's willing to meet with you again to discuss the project, but I'll warn you, Biodun, this is your last chance. Don't mess it up. Filled with a mix of hope and anxiety, Biodun eagerly accepted the opportunity. He asked about the investor who had changed his mind, but his boss gave no details, only telling him the meeting was set for the following week. Later that day, as Biodun returned home, he shared the news with Eniola. He was now careful with his words, as he didn't want to make any assumptions. Eniola, I've been given another chance with the investors, he said cautiously. I don't know what happened, but they've decided to meet with me again. Eniola listened to him intently. After a moment, she looked at him thoughtfully and said, Biodun, do you know who the investor is? He shook his head puzzled. No, why? She hesitated briefly before revealing. I think I might know who it is. I didn't tell you before, but my boss has a brother who works closely with several high-profile investors. I recently had a conversation with him at the office, and he mentioned your project. I had no idea it was his brother, but when he described the situation, I realized it was the same one you were handling. Biodun was stunned. You mean you convinced him? Eniola nodded gently. Yes, I explained the whole situation to him, how you've been going through a rough time and how much this project means to you. He must have spoken to his brother, and that's why they are giving you another chance. Biodun was speechless. The very person he had once doubted and mistreated had been the key to his second chance. His heart swelled with gratitude, but it was also heavy with regret. He had doubted Eniola's loyalty, accused her of infidelity, and now here she was, saving his career. I don't even know what to say. Biodun stammered. I don't deserve this. I don't deserve you. Eniola smiled faintly, though her eyes were still guarded. You've made mistakes, Biodun, but you're trying, and that's all I've ever wanted. The following week, Biodun met with the investors, including Eniola's boss's brother, who had agreed to give him a second chance. The meeting went smoothly, and by the end, they decided to proceed with the project again. Biodun's relief was immense, and he knew without a doubt that none of this would have been possible without Eniola's support. After the meeting, Biodun went home and immediately embraced Eniola, gratitude radiating from every part of him. Thank you, he whispered, his voice filled with sincerity. You saved my career. I'm sorry for everything I said and did. I regret every ill thing I ever thought about you and your boss. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. Eniola, still cautious but touched by his words, allowed herself to lean into the hug. She had been through so much with Biodun, but perhaps there was still hope for them after all. From that day forward, Biodun worked tirelessly to show Eniola how much he valued her. He was no longer the man who judged her for her humble beginnings. Instead, he saw her as the strong, intelligent, and loving woman she had always been. Through his efforts and her willingness to give him another chance, their relationship began to heal, slowly but surely. Biodun never forgot the lessons he had learned, and Eniola, though still guarded, began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could build something real after all. The lesson to be learned from this story is that we should never look down on anyone because of their circumstances. Everyone has something that makes them unique. So, do not be prideful, but in humility, value others above yourselves, as only then would you truly see the value in everyone else. Pride goes before the fall, so live in humility, and your days will be blessed. Also, do not marry a person if you have no genuine intentions towards them, for the institution of marriage is sacred and should be filled with love, patience, and forgiveness. Always learn to forgive whenever you are wronged, for no one on earth was born perfect. We all make mistakes and wrong others too, so we should learn to always have a forgiving heart. I hope you enjoyed the story.